Cars today are faster than they have ever been. You can walk into a dealership and buy a family SUV with 400 horsepower, launch control, heated seats, cooled seats, massaging seats, and enough screens to look like a NASA control room. And yet somehow the most enjoyable cars I have ever driven or ever wanted to drive have less power than a modern hot hatch. Because horsepower isn't everything. Sometimes the car just clicks. The steering feels right, the chassis talks to you, and the gearbox makes you want to shift even when you don't need to. And somehow, a car with 180 horsepower can leave a bigger impression than something with 500. So that's why today we are looking at 6 cars that feel way better than they should. Cars that completely outperform their spec sheets, and cars that will make you wonder where all the magic is hiding. So let's start the list. Alright, now this one is going to upset some people immediately. I don't like MX-5s. There, I said it, I hate them. Every time someone asks for a fun car recommendation, an MX-5 owner appears out of thin air, like an automotive Jehovah's Witness. Have you considered a Miata? Yes, I have considered it. I have considered it 500 times, and honestly, most MX-5s do absolutely nothing for me. But I have to admit that the NC deserves to be on this list, because this thing has absolutely no right to feel as good as it does. On paper, it's not particularly fast. Most versions make somewhere between 126 and 160 horsepower, depending on the engine and the market. Today, a normal Skoda Fabia can have this much horsepower, yet somehow the moment you find a good road, the numbers stop mattering. The steering is direct, the chassis is playful, the car changes directions instantly, and because you're not fighting massive horsepower, you can actually use all of it. That is something a lot of modern performance cars have forgotten. Some cars only become exciting when you're doing speeds that could make a police officer start smiling. The Mx-5 NC is fun almost immediately. Do I want one? Of course not. Would I choose one over an E46? Absolutely not. But if a car can make someone who doesn't even like MX-5s respect it this much, it's earned a place on this list. Alright, this might be one of the most shocking car on the list, because I hate Civics. Maybe even more than Miatas. I have never understood the obsession. They are just not my type. I don't like the front wheel drive and either how it looks. And probably if you parked a normal Civic outside my house right now, I'd probably walk past it without looking at it. But now the FK8, that's a completely different animal. Because this thing does something that front wheel drive cars are not supposed to do. It actually makes you forget that it's front wheel drive. The FK8 Type R produces around 320 horsepower depending on market, which is plenty, honestly, and unnecessary, in my opinion. But the impressive part isn't the power. It's how effectively the car puts that power down. The front end grip is ridiculous, the steering is sharp, the chassis feels incredibly sorted, and somehow Honda managed to make a front-wheel drive hatchback feel genuinely exciting on twisty road. Do I still think that it looks like a transformer that escapes from a Michael Bay movie? Yes. Do I still think that it is basically a very angry Civic? Also yes. But if you're talking purely about driving experience, I would definitely consider to take an FK8 over some cars with bigger engines and much more impressive badges. And that is exactly why it's here. Okay, now this one is a bit different, because unlike the previous 2 cars, I don't hate the GT86. I actually think it's a genuinely great car. The problem is that every time I look at GT86 prices, I start questioning reality. Because for that money, how much this car costs, there are a lot of other cars that I'd personally rather have. But here's the thing, this list isn't about value, sadly. But it's about cars that feel way better than they should. And the GT86 definitely belongs here. On paper, it's not particularly impressive, around 200 horsepower, not exactly fast by modern standards. In a straight line, there are diesel family cars that will keep up with it, and that's exactly why so many people miss the point. Because the GT86 was never designed to win traffic light drag races. It was designed to make driving fun again. The seating position is low, the center of gravity is incredibly low thanks to the Boxer engine, the steering is sharp, the gearbox feels great, and perhaps most importantly, the car actually wants to play. Modern performance cars often feel like they are trying to save you from yourself, but the GT86, it feels like it's encouraging bad decisions. Not illegal decisions that you shouldn't ever do, of course, but you know, just the kind where you take the long route home. For absolutely no reason. And that is becoming increasingly rare. You know, the best way I can describe the GT86 is that it feels like a modern interpretation of the old school sports car. Simple, lightweight, rear-wheel drive, manual, no unnecessary nonsense. And while I personally think they're a little overpriced these days, I completely understand why people love them. Because once you start driving one properly, you stop looking at the horsepower figure. And you start looking for the next corner. And honestly, that is usually the sign of a good driver's car. And now we are getting into the serious stuff. Because unlike the previous cars on the list, this isn't a car I respect. This is a car I genuinely love. And honestly, I think the Porsche 944 is one of the most underrated sports cars ever built. When most people think of Porsche, they think of the 911, the rear engine icon, the poster car, the dream car, and then sitting quietly in the corner is the 944. The car everyone forgets about, which is funny because of the driving perspective. The 944 is arguably one of the smartest cars Porsche ever built, and the reason is simple. Balance. The engine sits in the front, the gearbox sits in the rear. Thanks to its transaxle layout, the weight distribution is incredibly close to 50-50. And that's a thing you can definitely feel. The car doesn't want to fight with you. It doesn't surprise you. It just flows. Every input feels natural. The steering is beautiful. The chassis communicates exactly what's happening underneath you. And unlike many modern performance cars, the 944 doesn't feel like it's trying to impress anyone. It just focuses on being a great driver's car. And the funny thing is, on paper, most 944s aren't even that powerful. Depending on the model, you're looking at somewhere between roughly 150 and 250 horsepower. Today, that is hot hatch territory. But once you are behind the wheel, it feels like so much more. Because the car is constantly talking to you. Every corner feels rewarding, every road becomes interesting. And that's something a horsepower figure can never show. Honestly, I'd rather spend an afternoon driving a 944 on a mountain road than spend 10 minutes launching some modern 600 horsepower monster in a straight line. The 944 proves that driving enjoyment isn't about speed, it's about connection. And if you think that the 944 is underrated, wait until you hear my next pick, because this might be the biggest hot take in the entire video. Yes, my BMW bias is showing. Do I care? Definitely no. Because the E46 330i is one of the best cars BMW has ever built. And honestly, I think I would rather own one than a lot of modern M cars. Now before the comment section explodes, let me explain. The E46 330i isn't particularly special on paper. It has a natural aspirated 3-liter inline 6, around 231 horsepower, rear-wheel drive. Alright, never mind, it is special. And it also doesn't have turbochargers, launch control, drift mode, or giant touchscreens telling you your seat massage is ready. Just a good engine in a good chassis. And somehow that's enough. Actually, it's more than enough. Because the E46 comes from an era when BMW still built cars primarily around the driving experience. The steering feels alive, the chassis feels balanced, everything feels mechanical, and you feel connected to the car. And the M54 Straight 6 deserves a lot of credit too. It's smooth, it sounds amazing, and it loves to rev. And unlike many modern turbo engines, it doesn't feel like it's delivering all of its personality through a computer. Now maybe I am biased, but I actually own an E46. Now this one is actually a unicorn, because it still has the M52 engine, as my car was one of the very first 328 CIs ever made. And I even have the original factory papers of it. And yes, I have considered putting a N62 V8 in it, because apparently I enjoy making terrible financial decisions, but that's exactly why I know how good these cars are. The more time you spend around them, the more you understand why enthusiasts refuse to let them go. In a world where cars are becoming heavier, more digital, and more isolated from the driver, the E46 feels like a reminder of what made BMW legendary in the first place. And honestly, if someone handed me the keys to a perfect E46 330 Ci, or even a Touring tomorrow, I would be smiling long before I even started the engine. For years, people made fun of the Boxster. The poor man's Porsche, the hairdresser's car, the car you bought when you couldn't afford a 911. And honestly, the reputation may have created one of the most underrated sports cars ever built. Because if you stop caring about what people think for 5 minutes and actually focus on the driving experience, the 986 Boxster is absolutely brilliant. And that's why it is number one. Trust me, it is not better than the E46 for me, but I can see the positive side of the Boxster. Why it might be a better driver's car, or like at least equal. And also I put the E46 on the second place, so you guys won't say that I am an E46 enthusiast. Which I am. So now let's get back to the Boxster. The first thing that makes it special is the layout. Unlike the 911, the engine sits right behind the seats. So that means it's a mid-engine car. Exactly where sports car engineers dream of putting an engine. And the result is a car that feels incredibly balanced. Turn into a corner and the front end just goes exactly where you point it. There is no drama, the car is not fighting with you, no guessing, it feels natural, predictable, confident, and then there's the steering. Modern car manufacturers spend millions trying to recreate this feeling, and most fail. You actually feel connected to the road. Every bump, every change in grip, every little movement underneath the tires, the car talks to you constantly, and that is becoming increasingly rare. Now let's be honest. It's not perfect. Some people don't like the styling, and yes, there are certain mechanical issues that buyers should definitely research before jumping into ownership. But none of that changes the fact that the driving experience is phenomenal. What's really crazy is that many people shopping for a sports car will spend more money chasing horsepower, bigger engines, more cylinders, more boost, more everything, and then they will get absolutely humbled by an old Boxster on a twisty road. Because driving enjoyment isn't measured in horsepower, it's measured in smiles. And the 986 Boxster delivers an incredible amount of those. And honestly, if someone gave me the choice between a lot of modern performance cars and the clean, well-maintained 986 Boxster for a weekend on my favorite roads, I wouldn't need much time to think about it. The Boxster wouldn't win because it's the fastest car in here. It would win because it's the car that best proves the point of this entire video. Sometimes the numbers don't matter and the car just feels special. And the 986 Boxster feels far more special than it has any right to. So those are my 6 cars that feel way better than they should. And before the comment section starts throwing virtual wrenches at me, yes, I know, I left out a lot of cars. The Fiesta ST guys are angry, the Clio RS guys are typing already, and somewhere out there an MX-5 owner is preparing a 4,000 word essay explaining why all the 6 plus should have been Miatas. But there is a fun of lists like these. They are personal, they are subjective, and honestly, that's what makes cars interesting. Because the best car isn't always the fastest, it isn't always the most expensive, and it definitely isn't always the one with the biggest horsepower number. Sometimes it's the car that makes you take the long way home. The car that makes you look back at it after parking. And the car that reminds you why you became a car enthusiast in the first place. But I'm curious, what is your pick? What is a car that feels way better than it should, in your opinion? Let me know in the comment sections down below. I'm sure I have missed some great ones. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already for more automotive contents in the future. And now all you have to do is stay very positive, drive safe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.